Jeff Bezos has committed $1 billion to conservation. Is there any problem with that? Does it express a genuine intention to save the world? Or is it an example of some financial skullduggery that won't lead to any actual conservation? Let's have a look. Jeff Bezos, who, if you don't know, owns a little delivery service named Amazon. You want a parcel? You want a quick smart? Give Jeff a call. That parcel's coming any second now. Jeff Bezos is donating $1 billion of his $10 billion climate philanthropy pledge. I'll start a pledge, and I will save me a houseplant and some tarantulas, by Jove, for just $1 billion non-taxable dollars. To protect biodiversity and carbon-saving forests in the Andes, the Congo Basin, and the tropical Pacific Ocean. All good things, if you ask me. After nearly 3 decades leading Amazon, which has a vast and growing carbon footprint, I mean, it must do, mustn't it? Don't you feel guilty about your own Amazon use? Don't you think, oh no, not another one of these bloody things. Tearing that strip off, looking at that little smiley arrow face, I'm thinking, I could be getting this in a local shop. Do I need all this stuff? Do I need all this stuff? The answer is we do not need all this stuff. Bezos seems intent on forging a new identity as an environmentalist and perhaps the world's most generous financier in the fight against climate change. And that expensive trip to space he just took, Bezos says it was enlightening. Nature is our life support system, and it's fragile, said the billionaire. No, it isn't. Nature is a system within which we live. It's not our life support system. Nature is a comfy chair that I fart in and put out my cigars on, and it's fragile. Good old nature, we're just a couple of buddy boys. In seeing nature as primarily there for your own utility, you are entering into a kind of spiritual darkness. We are participants in nature, separated to some degree by the nature of our consciousness and our facility for language, which creates models that sort of somehow abstract us from a fully immersive experience, making people on some level afraid of their own animalism, their own instincts, their own sexuality, their complexity of being human. We are nature. We're not separate from nature. We're not saving fragile little old poor old nature. Nature is a mighty force that includes all reality, all material reality, and perhaps ulterior forces that we can't even begin to understand. Nature don't need us. Nature can cough us off its ass anytime it chooses. Jeff Bezos is not some billionaire Tarzan figure. He's just some bloke whose delivery business is doing rather well, in some part due to very unique conditions that are happening culturally, the advent of the internet, the pandemic, all sorts of factors, and with the advances in technology. You know, we don't need him saving nature. I was reminded of this in July when I went into space. Oh, well, thanks for that. I'm sure that rocket fuel was tremendously helpful for old nature. With Blue Origin, I'd heard that seeing the Earth from space changes your point of view of the world, but I was not prepared for just how much it would be true. Oh my God, look down there, the Earth. I could carbon footprint the shit out of that bastard. Bezos' commitment to protecting the environment serves as a stark reminder that much of his legacy and largely untaxed fortune was built by companies that have staggering carbon footprints. Amazon's carbon emissions have grown every year since 2018, and last year alone, when global carbon emissions fell roughly 7%, Amazon carbon emissions grew 19% to 60.64 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. Obviously, I can't conceptualize that, and I know that many of you don't particularly care around issues to do with climate. I feel like that our relationship with nature is very, very important and should be one of reverence, respect and love, not of unconscious ignorance. Wherever you stand on science around climate change, and my personal feeling is sort of transcendent of where data is, I feel like, wow, man, we should be operating in symbiotic harmony with our environments rather than unconsciously subjugating it for our convenience. That don't seem like a sensible way of living. How do you intuitively feel when you see the consequences of, I don't know, like we see some rivers all fucked up, or you just see stuff everywhere, like, you know, it don't feel good to me, and it wrecks me on some sort of subtle level. So I feel like that the intention should be changing the way we live to be more harmonious with the environments with which we have evolved, from which we have evolved in conjunction with our appetites, our intellect and our consciousness. We have grown in harmony with nature. We can't now wholly subjugate it and just, well, this is a thing we own. It's sort of mental to do that. It's a relatively modern phenomenon, even in sort of theological terms, and it doesn't seem to be one that's advantaging us in any way. But this video primarily is talking about pledges that are made to help nature when running a business that maybe ain't so helpful. I said that I couldn't conceptualize it. Here's how to conceptualize it. That's roughly equivalent to burning 140 million barrels of oil. There'd be some smoke there, I would have thought. Amazon has moved to reduce its dependence on fossil fuels by committing to electrifying its delivery vehicles, and it's recruited dozens of companies to sign its climate pledge. Like them vehicles, I think they have to get them independently and the drivers can't unionise. Oh, God. But for now, Amazon remains reliant on massive fleets of polluting delivery vehicles, wasteful packaging, and even a new fleet of jet fuel-powered planes. How quickly do you need your packages? Like the second the thought occurs to you, it was quick enough when it's like the next day. I want the package to arrive. I want it to whack me in the back of the head as soon as I think of it. Get some jet fuel. I want it shot at me out of a bazooka. Oh, do you know what? I've not seen Darling Buds of May for a while. DVDs directly into your brain. Meanwhile, Amazon Web Service uses massive amounts of energy to keep its servers online. In 2019, Greenpeace accused the cloud computing company of abandoning its pledge to use 100% renewable energy and said that some of the largest AWS data centers use just 12% renewable energy. Amazon disputes these allegations. To the contrary, Amazon is proud to be the world's largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy and everything else. We're on a path to power 100% of our businesses with renewable energy by 2025. And we're racing along that path with jet fuel. Even as other companies like Google have moved away from offering some cloud services to fossil fuel companies, AWS still lists Shell, Hess and BP as customers. Ooh. Bezos is technically no longer part of Amazon, but Blue Origin, the private spaceflight company he owns that recently took him to space, has raised environmental concerns, while the space rocket company has used carbon-free fuels, namely a combination of liquid hydrogen and oxygen. Making these fuels is still environmentally costly, and environmentalists warn that Blue Origin rockets still leave behind particles that can harm the atmosphere. Do you know what I get from this? It's like that everything's about gestures and appearances rather than about how it is fundamentally. Make a 1 billion pledge, a 10 billion pledge, when in effect what you could do is behave responsibly or differently, at least within the organisation, set up new principles and ideals from that position of power and influence. You know, like Jeff Bezos is a powerful person, and for all I know, a beautiful person. I don't know nothing about him. But what we do know is that he's in a position of incredible influence. He's unable to or use that influence to do anything other than advance the cause profits of Amazon. So I suppose in a way he has no actual power because, again, he's chained by systemic thinking and imperatives that if he were to alter them, he'd lose his position. So it shows you once again that really even powerful individuals exist as nodes in a sort of a web of entrenched dogmatic thinking. In announcing the pledge, Bezos acknowledged that many past efforts to conserve nature haven't worked. I know that many conservation efforts have failed in the past, Bezos said. We won't make those same mistakes. We're not even going to fucking try. Bezos and other billionaires are promising to support indigenous-led initiatives which represent something of a paradigm shift in conservation, but not all experts are convinced that their money will forge a new path or make a dent in the extinction crisis. While Bezos is known for disrupting the e-commerce world, the primary approach his fund is taking, bolstering the planet's network of protected and conserved areas, is not new and could even be considered old school. That's not to say protected areas don't work, they just don't do much to erode the root causes of biodiversity loss, which include the very culture of overconsumption and same-day convenience that has made Amazon. So there is a fundamental flaw at the heart of this. How do you preserve Amazon's imperatives to be the world's most powerful, successful business and save nature? You can't do that. So carry on with the real priority, Amazon, and make a gesture, even though that 10 billion gesture seems like a lot to normal people. It's nothing. Which is to say, while Bezos and other billionaires are aiding conservation, they're doing little to limit the forces that make conservation necessary in the first place and that made them rich. Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it? Essentially, this is a gesture. It doesn't really do anything. What has to be addressed are the root causes of the issue. These kind of initiatives are convenient because they work within established political and economic systems, the very ones that allow billionaires to thrive, said Jessica Dempsey, a political ecologist at the University of British Columbia. Protected areas obviously can be extremely important, but they don't challenge the existing concentrations of power and wealth. Protected and conserved areas don't, for example, address the issue of tax evasion, which limits the money that governments can spend on public conservation, Dempsey said. Bezos, like so many of the world's ultra-rich, pays barely any taxes to his wealth, which amounts to nearly 200 billion. This works very well for someone like Bezos because he's been a beneficiary of the structuring of our economy, which doesn't tax wealth, she said. Traditional conservation funding also does nothing to lessen the waste created by corporations like Amazon or the policies that enable them. What's 1 billion or even 5 billion compared to the ecological harm that philanthropists' companies have caused? So the philanthropy itself is a meaningless gesture that cannot address the problem and simply enables the continuation of their primary incentives and goals. Make money, continue with the business. Even these pledges are only being made, I would argue, not out of, I'm not talking about Jeff Bezos, who knows how his mind works, but I'm saying generally speaking, people aren't like, oh no, we've got to do something about the environment. What happens is, look, there's all this stuff about the environment, Greta bloody Thunberg, it's annoying. You've got to say something about the environment. 10 billion pledge to protect like this lovely bit of jungle. Yeah, that'll do. Say that then. Because if you actually wanted to impact ecological crises that you perceive, you would say, we're going to run our business differently. And of course, that's going to mean a loss of profit. And on some level, it'll mean that the convenience of the customer will alter. But what's that compared to the planet that we live on, which will survive in some form or another with or without us? But, let's face it, even the issue of conservation is motivated not by, oh, I really like plants and flowers. It's motivated by, shit, we're not going to be able to live here anymore. I won't be able to do stuff on it. That's where all my money is, on that planet. So recognise it for what it is, propaganda. You cannot have democratic approaches to any of these problems when you have that amount of concentrated wealth, says Dempsey, whose analysis, in my humble opinion, is spot on. But what do you think about these kind of gestures? What do you think is important and necessary? Do you actually even believe in regulation and breaking down of monopolies? Is that something that you care about? If you enjoyed this video, have a little look at this saucy little chap. And if you want to meditate now, and I strongly suggest you do, sign up to my side channel, Awakening with Russell Brand. It's brilliant. Sign up to my mailing list as well. That's just one click away. You'll get regular bulletins right from my brain, straight out of space. Thank you very much. Stay free.